She did not cry when she heard it. That was the part nobody expected. On the night of her birthday, surrounded by flowers she had chosen herself, wearing a dress her husband once said made her look like sunlight, Claire Mason stood behind a jasmine column on a private island terrace and heard her billionaire husband whisper to his mother, "On her birthday, the papers are ready, she'll fall apart, and you'll finally have your son back." Any other woman might have collapsed right there. Claire pressed one hand flat against her stomach, where their baby had been growing for 13 weeks without her husband's knowledge, and she felt something happen inside her chest. Not grief, not panic. Something cold, something clear. Something that had been building quietly for 14 months of smiling in rooms where she was being slowly, surgically erased. She had been stripped of her home, humiliated in front of a boardroom, accused of an affair she never had, exiled from her own marriage by a woman who had spent 20 years learning exactly how to destroy people while looking like she was helping them. But here is what Victoria Mason did not know. Her daughter-in-law had been taking notes the entire time, and in 3 days, at that same birthday dinner, in front of every donor, every board member, and one very quiet federal agent, Claire was going to open 3 envelopes that would bring an empire to its knees. Stay with her. Every second of this story is worth it. Lesson statement. This is a story about what happens when a woman finally stops apologizing for existing and remembers that the most dangerous thing she was ever holding was the truth. Meaning, Claire's story is for every woman who has ever been made to feel like a guest in her own life. For every wife who smiled through the wound. For every person who was told they did not belong in the room they built with their own hands. Real power is not given. It is recognized. And sometimes it takes losing nearly everything to finally see what you were holding all along. If this story moved you, if Claire's strength felt familiar, if her pain felt like something you have carried too, then this channel was made for you. Hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells us that stories like this matter. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because every single week we bring you a new story of a woman who was underestimated, overlooked, or written off, and who refused to stay that way. Share this with one woman in your life who needs to hear it today. Your sister, your friend, your daughter. The woman in your life who is holding on and does not yet know how strong she actually is. And drop a comment below. Tell me, at what moment did you stop feeling sorry for Claire and start feeling proud of her? I read every single comment, every one. Now, let Claire's story begin.
On the night of her 34th birthday, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and champagne she could not drink, Claire Mason heard 3 words from her husband that stopped her heart. Not "I love you," not "Happy birthday." He leaned toward his mother across the candlelit table, his voice low and certain, and whispered, "Tonight, it's done." Claire stood very still behind the jasmine column, one hand pressed flat against her stomach, the other gripping the stone railing of the private island terrace. The warm tropical air suddenly felt like glass. Around her, the ocean moved the way it always did. Indifferent, enormous, completely unbothered by the fact that a woman's entire world was cracking open. She had been married to Ethan Mason for 14 months. She had loved him. For every single one of them. She had trusted him with the softest parts of herself. The parts she had protected her whole life. The parts she had given only to him, and he had handed them to his mother. What Claire did not know in that moment, what she could not yet see from behind that jasmine column, was that she was not powerless. She was not the woman Victoria Mason had spent 14 months trying to turn her into. She was not the naive art teacher who had married above her station and was now being quietly, politely, surgically erased. She was a legal co-owner, of one of the largest private holding companies on the East Coast. She was 13 weeks pregnant with Ethan's child, and she had been taking notes. Flash forward, 3 months later. Claire standing at a penthouse window, visibly pregnant, 3 sealed ivory envelopes on the table beside her, the city below glittering like spilled diamonds, her expression calm, resolved, ready. Then, darkness. 3 months earlier. The coffee was already made when Claire padded into the kitchen, barefoot. That was the thing about Ethan Mason that nobody in his industry would have believed. The man who ran 4 tech companies and commanded boardrooms full of people who charged $800 an hour for their opinions. That man made his wife's coffee every single morning. Vanilla hazelnut, precisely measured, the cream poured at exactly the angle she had shown him during their second week of dating when she had laughed and said, "You're doing it wrong." And he had looked at her like she had just handed him the secret to something important. "You're already awake," he said, turning from the counter, holding out the mug. "I'm always awake before you pretend to be awake," Claire said. He grinned. The real one. Not the boardroom smile, not the charity gala smile, the one that only came out in the kitchen at 7 in the morning, when his hair was still a disaster, and he was wearing the gray sweatshirt with the frayed left cuff that she had threatened to throw away 17 times. She accepted the mug and breathed it in. "Perfect. What are you doing today?" he asked, leaning against the counter and watching her the way he did sometimes. Like she was a problem he had solved and was still quietly amazed by. "I have the Westfield Elementary proposal to finish," she said, "the one for the after-school arts program. The one you've been working on for 6 weeks. The one I've been working on for 6 weeks," she confirmed, which is a completely normal amount of time to spend on something that matters. Ethan reached over and tucked a strand of her dark blonde hair behind her ear. "You know what I was thinking about this morning when I woke up and you weren't in bed? That we need a better alarm system. That out of every company I've built, every deal I've closed, every number I've put on a board." He paused, and his voice dropped into the register she loved most, the one without performance in it. "You are the only thing that made any of it feel like it was for something." Claire looked at him over the rim of her mug. "You say things like that, and then you leave your wet towel on the bathroom floor." "I'm a complicated man." She laughed, that free, unguarded sound she had forgotten she could make until she met him, the one that came from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been quiet for a long time before Ethan. She had grown up in a small house in Columbus, Ohio, with her mother, Margaret, Marge, everyone called her, a retired nurse who had worked double shifts and never once complained, and had raised Claire with the absolute conviction that love was not a feeling. It was a decision, made daily, made especially on the hard days. Claire had believed that. She still believed it. She just had not anticipated that the hardest days were coming faster than she knew. Later that morning, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and her notes spread around her, Claire put the finishing touches on her Westfield Elementary proposal. The after-school arts program would serve 212 students in her old neighborhood. She had visited the school 3 times. She had met the principal, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had cried the second time Claire came back and said, "Most people promise, you keep showing up." Claire had not told Ethan the full scope of how much that visit had affected her. She was not sure she had the words for it yet. The feeling of walking through those hallways, recognizing the linoleum, the particular smell of old building and fresh crayons, the weight of knowing that the kids in those classrooms were the same age she had been when her own art teacher had handed her a set of watercolors and quietly changed the direction of her life. She saved the document, sent it to herself, closed the laptop. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Marge, How's the most beautiful woman in a Manhattan penthouse today? Claire, finishing the Westfield proposal. Nervous about presenting it to the foundation board? Marge, nervous is good. Nervous means you care. Confident is for people who don't understand the stakes. Claire smiled. Set the phone down. Outside, 60 floors below, the city moved without her. Taxis and coffee carts, and 10,000 small, urgent lives. She pressed her palm flat against the cool glass and thought about Mrs. Patterson, about 212 kids, about watercolors. She did not yet know that by the time she presented that proposal, Victoria Mason would already be in the penthouse. She did not yet know that by the time the foundation board meeting ended, she would be sitting alone in a bathroom stall, gripping the edge of a sink, staring at her own reflection with the specific expression of a woman who has just understood that the war started without her consent. But that was not today. Today the coffee was perfect. The proposal was finished. Ethan's sweatshirt was still on the chair where he had left it. Today still felt like hers. Engagement point 1. If you have ever loved someone and thought, this is solid, this is real, nothing can reach us here, stay with Claire, because what comes next is about what happens when love is not enough to protect you, and what you have to become when you decide to protect yourself. Victoria Mason did not knock. She never knocked. Knocking implied that the space you were entering belonged to someone else. And Victoria had never in her 71 years accepted that any room she walked into was not, in some essential way, hers. She arrived on a Tuesday with 2 Louis Vuitton trunks, a personal assistant named Greg, who communicated exclusively in hushed tones, and a reason. The foundation audit, she announced, setting her handbag on the kitchen counter. Claire's kitchen counter, the one with the ceramic rooster Claire had bought at a flea market in Brooklyn because it made her laugh, without looking at Claire at all. It's more complex than anticipated. I'll need to be here for 2 weeks, 3 at most. Claire looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at the middle distance. Of course, Wickens said. The guest suite is ready. Victoria swept through the penthouse like a woman conducting an inspection. Her eyes moved across every surface, every choice, every small evidence of Claire's presence in the space she and Ethan had built together. The throw blankets on the sofa, the family photos on the entryway shelf, the Dale Chihuly glass sculpture, swirling blues and greens, the one Ethan had bought her at a gallery on their 6-month anniversary because she had stood in front of it for 20 minutes without speaking. Lovely, Victoria said, pausing in front of the sculpture. Very colorful. The way she said colorful made it sound like a polite word for something else entirely. Later, when Ethan was on a call, Victoria found Claire in the kitchen and sat down at the counter with the ease of a woman settling into her rightful chair. I want us to be honest with each other, Victoria said. Her voice was warm, her eyes were not. I'd like that, Claire said carefully. Ethan has a legacy to protect. This foundation, this family name, these things existed long before you arrived, and they will exist long after any of us are gone. She paused. I'm not your enemy, Claire. I'm simply a woman who understands what this family requires, and I'd like to help you understand it too. She reached into her bag and placed a small velvet box on the counter. Inside was a bracelet, diamonds and platinum. Staggeringly beautiful. Claire lifted it, turned it over, tried to slide it onto her wrist. It was too small, by half an inch at least. Claire was not a large woman. This bracelet had been made for someone smaller. It was Ethan's grandmother's, Victoria said, watching. It's been in the family for decades. It's beautiful, Claire said. It doesn't quite fit. No, Victoria agreed, and something in her expression settled into a satisfaction so brief Claire almost missed it. I suppose it doesn't. That evening, Claire called her mother. She brought me a bracelet that doesn't fit, Claire said. Marge was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then, honey, that's not a gift. That's a measurement. Mom, I'm serious. A woman like that doesn't make mistakes about jewelry. She wanted to know if you'd say something. You didn't, right? I said it was beautiful. Good girl. Keep your cards close. A pause. Also, I looked her up. She was a corporate attorney for 20 years. You know what corporate attorneys are good at, Mom? Making things look like accidents. Claire laughed despite herself. You're being dramatic. Claire Margaret Hartwell Mason, her mother said, with the specific gravity of a woman who had raised a daughter alone and knew exactly what she was talking about. I am never dramatic. I am frequently right and occasionally early. 2 days later, Victoria redirected the catering staff for Claire's upcoming foundation dinner. New menu, new seating arrangement, new centerpieces, all of it implemented before Claire arrived home from a meeting. The Dale Chihuly sculpture was gone from its place by the window. The staff said it had been moved for the event setup. It never came back. The foundation board meeting was held in the Mason family foundation conference room on the 38th floor of the Midtown office tower. Claire had prepared for 6 weeks. She had the budget projections. She had letters of support from 3 principals. She had demographic data, outcome projections, comparable program results from 4 other cities. She had practiced her presentation in front of the bathroom mirror at 6 in the morning while Ethan slept, and she had practiced it again to her mother over the phone, and she had gotten to the point where she could deliver it without notes and without hesitation and without the slightly elevated heart rate that still visited her whenever she stood in front of rooms full of people who had been born knowing they belonged there. The board members filed in, donors, directors, legacy names on the foundation letterhead. They shook hands, took their seats, poured their water. Victoria entered last. She sat at the far end of the table. She folded her hands. She smiled at Claire with the expression of someone watching a child perform a school play. Supportive, patient, waiting for it to be over. Claire stood up. She was good. She knew she was good. Her voice was clear. Her data was solid. Her passion for those 212 kids was real in a way that no amount of polish or rehearsal could manufacture. Mrs. Patterson's face was in her mind. The linoleum hallways, the smell of crayons. She was 3 minutes in when Victoria laughed. It was a small laugh, soft, almost affectionate, the kind of laugh that arrives with a gentle tilt of the head and a smile that says, I find you charming. Claire, darling, Victoria said, and the room turned toward her like flowers toward a stronger light. This is so beautifully passionate. Truly. She paused. I just want to ask, and forgive me if this sounds technical, do you have a background in nonprofit governance, grant allocation strategy, impact metrics, and educational programming? Silence. Claire felt the floor shift slightly under her feet. I have a background in education, she said. I taught for 7 years. Of course you did. Victoria's smile widened. And that passion is exactly what makes you such a wonderful addition to this family. But perhaps, and here she turned to the board members with the easy authority of a woman who had been running this room for 2 decades before Claire had ever heard the name Mason. Perhaps we let the professionals walk us through the allocation models. Richard, would you mind? Richard, a senior board member, who had been with the foundation for 15 years and who had never once looked uncomfortable until this moment, cleared his throat and reached for his folder. The room moved on. Claire sat down. She kept her face perfectly still. She kept her hands flat on the table. She looked at Ethan. He was writing something on a notepad. He did not look up. After the meeting, Claire walked to the women's restroom at the end of the hall, went into the furthest stall, locked the door, and stood with her back against the wall and her eyes on the ceiling until the pressure behind them receded. She did not cry. She had decided some time ago that she would not give Victoria Mason tears she had not earned through genuine relationship. The woman had not earned anything from Claire except wariness. But standing in that bathroom stall, Claire understood something that had been forming slowly for weeks and had now solidified into undeniable clarity. This was not a difficult mother-in-law. This was not a woman who was protective and old-fashioned and would warm up in time, the way Ethan kept quietly suggesting this was a campaign. And Claire was the target. She pulled out her phone, texted her mother, Claire. She shut me down in front of the whole board. Ethan said nothing. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 3 times before Marge's response came through. Marge. Are you in a bathroom right now? Claire. Yes. Marge. Come out of the bathroom, wash your hands, walk back in there like you own the room. Because, honey, you might actually own part of it. Have you read your marriage contract? Claire stared at the message. She had not read her marriage contract. Not thoroughly. She had signed where the attorneys told her to sign and trusted that Ethan's people were Ethan's people, and therefore also, in some sense, her people. She had not yet learned that assumption was the most expensive mistake a woman could make. She washed her hands, she walked back out, she smiled at every board member by name, thanked them for their time, asked follow-up questions about their areas of interest. She was gracious and warm and completely unreadable. Victoria watched her from across the room with an expression that had shifted, almost imperceptibly, from satisfaction to something more careful. Recalculation. Good, Claire thought. Let her recalculate. Tom Briggs had worked for the Mason family for 11 years. He was 62, broad-shouldered and quiet, the kind of man who arrived before anyone else and left after everyone, and who knew every plant in the Hamptons property by name. Claire had liked him immediately from the first visit to the estate, when he had offered to show her the rose garden and then spent 45 minutes talking about his daughter, Emma's, college plans with the specific pride of a father who could not quite believe he had made something so good. She ran into him in the parking garage of the Manhattan building on a Wednesday morning in October. He was sitting in the driver's seat of the family car with the door open and his face in his hands. Claire stopped. Tom! He looked up. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mason, he said immediately, starting to compose himself. I'm fine. Please don't. Tom. She sat down in the back seat beside him. Tell me. It came out in pieces. His wife, Linda, stage 3 breast cancer, diagnosed 6 weeks ago. The treatment plan the specialist had recommended was not covered by the family's insurance plan. A gap in coverage that Tom had not known existed until he tried to file the first claim. The specialist's fee for a 12-week protocol, $42,000. Tom's savings, $11,000. The difference, everything. I haven't told anyone, he said. I don't want... I know this isn't... How much do you need? Claire said. Mrs. Mason, I can't ask you. Tom may... Her voice was gentle and completely firm. How much do you need? She transferred the money that afternoon from her personal account. She drove to Tom's apartment with 2 bags of groceries because she remembered that when her mother had been sick the year before, nothing serious, a hip replacement, but still, The thing that had helped most was not the cards or the calls, but the specific practical fact of food appearing without having to think about it. She hugged Tom in his kitchen, while his wife rested in the next room and told him to focus on Linda, that everything else would work itself out. She did not tell Ethan that evening, because she knew, with the certainty of a woman who had been watching Victoria Mason for 4 months, that any kindness she showed to any member of the staff would be archived and repurposed. She texted Tom from the car, "Don't mention this to Ethan yet. I'll explain everything soon. Focus on Linda." She did not know about the cameras. Victoria had installed 4 additional security cameras throughout the building's common areas and parking levels after the Chiali incident, framed to Ethan as a security upgrade following increased public interest in the family. Ethan had approved the request without reading the full placement report. The footage of Claire in the back seat with Tom was clear and damning if you did not know what you were looking at. Victoria knew exactly how to make sure no one knew what they were looking at. The edited presentation took 3 days to assemble. 6 minutes of footage, selectively sequenced. Claire at Tom's apartment, twice, late. The money transfer, the hug, the text message on screen, enlarged. "Don't mention this to Ethan yet." Victoria delivered it on a Thursday evening when Ethan came home from a 12-hour day exhausted and already armored against softness. Claire was in the kitchen making dinner when she heard the silence from Ethan's study change quality. She knew before he appeared in the doorway that something had broken. His face was stone. "My office," he said. "Now." He would not look at her. That was the thing Claire remembered afterward. Not the accusation, not the cold precision of his voice, not even the specific words. It was the way Ethan Mason, the man who had once told her that watching her sleep was his favorite form of meditation, would not look at her while he destroyed everything they had built. The laptop screen showed the footage, the photographs, the text message enlarged to the size of a verdict. "Were you with him?" he said. Not a question. "Ethan, listen to me. Were you involved with him?" Still not a question. His jaw was set. His eyes were somewhere past her left shoulder. Emotionally, physically, either. "No." She kept her voice even. "Tom's wife has cancer. I gave him money to help pay for her treatment. That is everything that happened. The timestamps on those messages are from when I visited their apartment with groceries. Ethan, call Tom. Right now. Call him and ask him." Something moved across his face. Brief. A crack in the stone. And then Victoria's voice came from the doorway, smooth and sorrowful. "Darling, I had the account transfers independently verified. And the security logs show 14 visits to that level of the garage in the past 3 months, most while you were traveling." Claire turned to look at her mother-in-law. Victoria's expression was compassion itself, regretful, pained, the face of a woman who had known all along and had held out hope and had been, tragically, proven right. "I'm going to need you both to give me a moment with my husband," Claire said. "Of course." Victoria touched Ethan's arm as she passed. "I'm so sorry, darling." The door closed. Claire looked at Ethan. "This is manufactured," she said quietly. "Your mother installed cameras without telling either of us. She edited that footage. The text message about not telling you was because I knew she would do exactly this. Weaponize kindness." She took one step toward him. "You know me. You have known me for 2 years. Have I ever given you a single real reason to doubt me?" Ethan stared at the laptop screen. "The timestamps," he said again. "Call Tom." A pause that lasted approximately 1 decade. "I need space," Ethan said finally. "I'm moving to the guest suite. My lawyers will—" "Ethan?" Don't. The word was a door closing. Don't do the voice. Don't look at me like that. I can't. Just don't. He picked up the laptop and walked out. Claire stood in his study for a long time after he left. The city was dark outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The penthouse was quiet in the specific way that spaces go quiet when they have been emptied of something essential. She walked to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror, hollow eyes, tight jaw, a woman she almost recognized. She pressed her hands flat on the cold marble of the sink. Then she opened her phone and called her mother. "Mom," she said when Marge picked up on the second ring. That was all she managed before the tears came. Not graceful tears. The kind that arrive in waves, that bend you forward, that have been building for 4 months of smiling in rooms where you were being slowly, systematically dismantled. Marge let her cry for 2 minutes. Then, with the precision of a woman who had been a nurse for 30 years and understood the difference between grief that needed space and grief that needed direction, she said, "Okay, are you done?" Claire laughed through the end of the tears. "No." "Close enough. Listen to me. Have you eaten today?" "Mom?" "Have you eaten? Some of it. Go eat the rest of it. Then I need you to do something. Find your marriage contract. Find the full corporate filing from when you and Ethan restructured his holdings after the wedding. Read every page. Do you hear me?" "You think there's something in there?" "I think," Marge said carefully, "that a woman who married into a billion-dollar empire and was not handed a prenuptial agreement has legal rights she does not yet know about. And I think that a woman named Victoria Mason spent 20 years as a corporate attorney specifically because she understands that information is the only power that matters." A pause. "She's been trying to make you feel powerless, baby," Marge said quietly. "Which means she's afraid of what you might do if you knew you weren't." Engagement point 2. Every woman watching this knows the specific loneliness of being disbelieved by the person who is supposed to know you best. The loneliness of standing in the middle of your own life and suddenly feeling like a stranger in it. If you have ever felt that, Claire feels it too. Keep watching. Tom Briggs arrived at the penthouse the next morning. He had Linda's hospital admission records, the specialist's invoice, the insurance denial letters, and the money transfer confirmation. He laid them on the kitchen table in front of Ethan with the quiet dignity of a man who had worked for the same family for 11 years and had never once been asked to defend his integrity. Ethan looked at the documents for a long time. Then he looked at Claire. "I was trying to help his wife," Claire said simply. "That's everything." Ethan set down the papers. He reached across the table and took her hand. "Claire," he said, God, I'm sorry. I should have. I know," she said. The relief in the room was enormous, warm, real. Tom excused himself quietly. Ethan kept hold of Claire's hand. He looked like a man who had been very cold for a very long time and had just remembered what warmth was. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," he said. "We'll talk about it," Claire said. "But yes, we will talk about it." She went to shower, changed, came back feeling, for the first time in weeks, like the ground under her feet was solid. When she walked back into the kitchen, Ethan was standing at the counter, with his phone in his hand and the expression she had seen once before, in his study when he would not look at her. "Ethan?" He turned the phone screen toward her. Emails, her name in the sender field. Messages to Tom going back 5 months, before she had even known about Linda's illness, before she had even met Tom properly. Messages that read like the correspondence of two people in the middle of something private, something chosen. I can't stop thinking about last Thursday, one of them said. When can we talk? Just us, said another. I need you to know I don't regret any of this, said a third. Claire stared at the screen. Those are not from me, she said. They're from your email address. Someone forged them. Ethan, those events didn't happen. I wasn't. Last Thursday, I was at the Westfield school meeting. You know that. You dropped me off. Claire. His voice had gone somewhere far away. Somewhere she could not reach. Someone hacked my email, she said, or created a spoofed account. Ethan, look at the sending address. Look carefully. But he had already put the phone in his pocket. I need to think, he said. He walked past her toward the hallway. Ethan. He stopped but did not turn around. On our first anniversary, Claire said, you wrote me a note that said, you make even breathing look like poetry. You put it in my skincare drawer. I still have it. Her voice was very steady. Do you think the woman those emails describe put that note in her drawer and kept it for a year? A long silence. I need to think, he said again. He left. On the counter, his phone was briefly face up before he took it. Claire had seen, in the split second before he pocketed it, the sender information at the top of the email chain. The domain was off by one character. Claire Mason at masonholdings.com, not Claire Mason at masongroup.com. A spoofed account, professionally done. The kind of thing that required both technical skill and access to private correspondence to mimic her writing style accurately. Brooke Calloway, who had been introduced as a Foundation technology consultant, had access to Foundation email servers. Claire stood in the kitchen alone, the note from the sparkling morning that now felt like a different lifetime. You make even breathing look like poetry. Was still in the silk box in her drawer. She walked to the bedroom, opened the drawer, took out the box. 27 notes. 14 months of small, handwritten evidence that this man had once chosen tenderness over everything else available to him. She set the box on the bed. Then she picked up her phone and called attorney Susan Ford. The Mason family private island retreat was scheduled 4 weeks later, a 4-day event culminating in Claire's birthday. Ethan remained in the penthouse but had not moved back to their bedroom. He was polite, careful, the specific politeness of someone maintaining distance while deciding something. Claire had told no one, not Ethan, not Marge, not Susan Ford, that she was 11 weeks pregnant. She had taken the test alone in a drugstore bathroom 2 weeks earlier, standing under fluorescent lights with a plastic bag from the pharmacy in her hand. And the result had arrived with the particular cruelty of good news in a terrible context. Joy and terror braided together so tightly she could not separate them. She could not tell Ethan. Not while he was looking at her, like she might be a lie. She could not tell her mother. Not yet. Marge would come to Manhattan immediately and confront Ethan personally, which was both exactly what Claire loved about her mother, and precisely what the situation did not need. She kept the appointment with her doctor confidential, collected the documentation directly. The island was what she had always imagined a private island would be. Glass villas over turquoise water, sand that looked manufactured, staff who appeared before you knew you needed them. Objectively stunning, functionally suffocating. The family moved through their days in a careful choreography of performance, business discussions from which Claire was gently and consistently excluded. Photographs that, when reviewed, showed Claire at the edge of the frame or facing slightly away. A seating arrangement at the group dinner that placed Brooke Calloway beside Ethan and Claire at the far end of the table, near the window, with an excellent view of the ocean and a complete inability to hear the primary conversation. Brooke smiled at her across the fruit bowl on the second morning. "You look tired, Claire. The humidity gets to some people." Claire smiled back. "How kind of you to notice." She texted Marge under the table. "Claire, the mistress just told me I look tired." The response came in under 10 seconds. "Marge, does she know you're pregnant, armed with evidence, and your grandmother was a courtroom stenographer? Tell her to enjoy the fruit bowl while she can." Claire pressed her lips together to stop the laugh. The third evening, she slipped away from the group dinner needing air. The pool area was quiet, lit from below, the water glowing pale blue in the dark. She sat on the edge and let the stillness settle around her. Then she heard voices from the cabana. "You're sure about the timing?" Victoria's voice, low, certain, on her birthday. "Ethan." He sounded tired, defeated, like a man reciting lines he had memorized but did not fully believe. "The papers are drafted." "And you're prepared for the scene?" Victoria pressed. "She'll cry. She'll fall apart." "You were right about everything, Mother." "Of course I was, darling. On her birthday, you end it. She breaks down and you'll finally be free. I'll have my son back." Claire sat on the edge of the pool with her feet just above the water. She waited for the devastation to hit. It did not hit. Or rather, it arrived and passed through her like something that had already happened. Something she had already absorbed on some cellular level weeks ago, and what was left on the other side was not grief. It was clarity. She walked back to her villa. She opened her laptop. She looked at the documents Susan Ford had sent her earlier that week. The corporate filing she had finally read, cover to cover, twice. Claire Margaret Hartwell Mason, co-trustee and equal signatory, Whittel Mason Holdings International, filed 18 months ago by Ethan's own attorneys as part of a post-marriage tax optimization structure. She was not a guest in this empire. She was half of it. The next morning brought the third catastrophe. She came down to breakfast to find a place card at the seat beside Ethan with Brooke Calloway's name on it. Her own card had been moved to the seat beside Victoria. The staff moved around the table with the ease of people following an established order. Claire picked up Brooke's place card, turned it over, set it back down. She texted Dan Kowalski, Ethan's CFO, who had been feeding her quiet pieces of information for 3 weeks out of some combination of loyalty and moral clarity that she had not yet fully understood. "Claire, did Victoria brief the staff on the new seating?" Dan, "Last night. I'm sorry, Claire, I saw it happen." Claire, "I need you to do something for me." Dan, "Already ahead of you. Check your email." She went back to her villa and opened her laptop. Dan had forwarded 4 years of Foundation financial reports, flagged in yellow. The irregularities were not subtle once you knew to look for them. Offshore transfers, a shell company, a name that appeared in the billing records and nowhere legitimate. Callaway Meridian, Consulting, LLC, Brooks Company. 2 years of payments. Before Claire had ever met Ethan, before the fake affair narrative, before any of it. This was not a reaction to Claire. Claire had been recruited as a distraction, a scapegoat, a woman who could be built up and then knocked down in a way that would discredit the Foundation's internal oversight and cover the tracks of what was already happening. She sat with that knowledge for a long time. Then she called Susan Ford. "I have it all," she said. "All of it. How do we use it?" Back in Manhattan, Claire worked for 10 days with the precision of a woman who understood that she had one opportunity and that it had to be irrefutable. Susan Ford's office became the war room. The offshore transfers from the Foundation's scholarship fund, money meant for first-generation college students, led to 3 Cayman accounts. Two of those accounts had a single additional beneficiary signature, Victoria Mason. The third was registered to Edward Calloway, Brooke's father, a name that appeared on exactly two other documents, a property deed for a Mediterranean villa purchased 4 years ago, and a single wire transfer receipt for $2.3 million labeled Strategic Consulting Services. She's been funding her own life with children's scholarship money, Susan Ford said, setting down the last page, for at least 4 years. Can we prove it? Claire said. We can prove it 6 ways. Susan paused. But Claire, I want to be careful here. This goes to Ethan first or to the authorities first? Both, Claire said. Same night, same room, in front of everyone who matters. She spent 3 days planning her birthday dinner. Guest list selected with surgical precision. Foundation board members, major donors, 2 investigative journalists who covered financial fraud, listed on the invitation as personal friends, Dan Kowalski, Susan Ford, and, at Claire's specific request, a federal compliance officer from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division named Agent Patricia Walsh, introduced to the caterer as a college friend. The physical evidence was duplicated across 3 secure locations. The state filing copies that Victoria had managed to flag for review were rendered irrelevant by the private forensic accounting firm Claire had hired. Their certification was notarized and complete. She chose her birthday dress herself, champagne silk. The one Ethan had once said made her look like sunlight. She wore the diamond earrings from their wedding day. She had her hair done at the salon and sat in the chair and watched herself in the mirror and thought about her mother, about Mrs. Patterson, about Linda Briggs getting her treatment because someone had chosen to show up. She thought about the baby. 13 weeks now, a small, insistent, entirely determined presence. She thought about what she was about to do. Victoria, watching Claire finalize the flower arrangements the morning of the party, remarked, "How involved you are in your own birthday planning. Most women would be too emotional." "I want everything to be perfect," Claire said pleasantly. "It's going to be a night no one forgets." Victoria's eyes narrowed. Just slightly. Recalculation. That evening, alone in her room before the guests arrived, Claire laid 3 ivory envelopes on the dressing table, her name written on each one in her own careful script. She rested her hand on her stomach. "I know this is going to be a lot to witness for someone your age," she said quietly, "but I need you to know, everything I'm about to do, I'm doing so that you arrive into a world where the truth has already been told." She picked up her phone and called Marge. "It's tonight," Claire said. "I know," Marge said. "I'm already in the car." Mom, you don't have to." "Claire Margaret, I drove 300 miles in a snowstorm to see you in the 5th grade talent show. I am not missing this." The penthouse had been transformed. 10,000 white orchids, candlelight from 400 votives, the string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner, with the specific soft confidence of musicians who understood they were backdrop for something much larger than music. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits moved through the room, murmuring appreciation. Victoria, in midnight blue, worked the room with the ease of a woman who had been doing this for 40 years. Brooke, in a fitted black dress, stayed close to Ethan. Claire descended the staircase at 8:15, champagne silk, diamond earrings, posture like a woman who had remembered, in the last possible moment, who she was. She watched Ethan see her from across the room, watched something shift in his face, a crack in the frost he'd been wearing for months. His prepared speech, she could see, was suddenly inadequate in ways he did not yet understand. She worked the room for an hour. She was warm and present and completely unreadable. She hugged Dan Kowalski and said, quietly, "Ready?" And he said, with his particular deadpan, "I have been ready for approximately 2 years." She shook Agent Walsh's hand and said, "Thank you for coming," and Walsh said, "Wouldn't miss it." After dinner, after the champagne toast that Claire raised to her lips and did not drink, after the cake was cut and photographed, Ethan stood, cleared his throat, and began. "I think this is a moment for honest conversation," he said. "Claire and I—" "Before you continue," Claire said. Her voice was clear as a bell. The room went still. "I have some birthday gifts I'd like to share. 3 to be exact." She opened the first envelope. Copies fanned out across the table, placed in front of keyboard members with the efficiency of a woman who had practiced the sequence 12 times. "My first gift is clarity," she said. "According to corporate documents filed by your own attorneys, Ethan, I am co-trustee and equal signatory of Mason Holdings International. Any divorce proceeding triggers mandatory asset review and requires my consent for restructuring." She let that settle. "I am not a powerless guest in this family. I am a legal partner." The room shifted. Richard Chen, the senior board member, who had redirected her proposal 4 months ago, looked down at the documents in front of him and went very quiet. Claire opened the second envelope. "My second gift is for the foundation board." She placed the financial reports on the table. 4 years of systematic theft from this foundation's scholarship fund. Offshore transfers to accounts controlled by Victoria Mason. $2.3 million routed through a shell company called Callaway Meridian Consulting, owned by Edward Callaway. A name some of you might recognize from Victoria's personal life. Photographs, bank statements, forensic accounting certifications, independently verified by 3 private forensic accountants, originals submitted to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division as of 9 this morning. Victoria shot to her feet. "This is absurd. She forged—" "Sit down, Victoria," Dan Kowalski said from across the table, with the specific calm of a man who had been waiting a very long time. "The journalists are already typing." The 2 investigative journalists at the far end of the table, neither of whom were writing anything yet, but both of whom were watching with expressions of pure professional focus, did not deny it. Victoria looked at Brooke. Brooke looked at the table. "My third gift," Claire said, and her voice finally, briefly wavered, just once, just enough to be human, "is for the father of my child." She placed the ultrasound image in front of Ethan. The room went absolutely silent. "I'm 13 weeks pregnant. Conception date right there, verified by my physician. I didn't tell you because you made me afraid to tell my husband I was carrying his baby." Her voice held. "That's what this family did to me, Ethan. They took the best part of what we had and made me afraid to protect it." Ethan stared at the ultrasound. His hands were shaking. Both of them. "The timeline," he said, almost to himself. He was doing the math. The dates. The affair that had never happened. The woman he had exiled while she was carrying his child. "Claire, I—" His voice broke completely. "Oh God, what have I done?" He reached for her hand. She let him take it. Around them, the room erupted. Victoria's denials escalated into panic. As board members stood, demanded explanations, backed away from the woman who had controlled them through fear and family name for 2 decades. Agent Walsh moved efficiently through the room toward Victoria with the particular calm of a federal agent who has everything she needs. Brooke gathered her bag and moved toward the door. Dan Kowalski watched her go. "Enjoy the cab, Brooke," he said. "I hear traffic's terrible tonight." Claire turned away from all of it. From Victoria's crumbling authority and Ethan's devastated face and the sound of a dynasty being dismantled. She walked to the window, the city below glittering and cold and completely indifferent. She pressed one hand against the glass, one hand against her stomach. The tears came now, finally, and they were not tears of defeat or humiliation or grief. They were the tears of a woman releasing 14 months of swallowed pain. The tears of someone who has been holding their breath so long they have forgotten what real air feels like. She breathed it in. Behind her, Ethan said her name. She turned around. His face was completely open. All the frost gone, all the careful distance collapsed, leaving only the man who had once danced with her at dawn and written notes and made her coffee every morning. Because some rituals are worth protecting. I believed her, he said. I chose her version of you over the you I actually knew. And I don't. I don't have a reason for that makes it okay. I just need you to know that I know what I did. Claire looked at him for a long time. I know, she said finally. And we're going to have to figure out whether that's something we can actually come back from. She paused. But not tonight. Not tonight, he agreed. Marge appeared at Claire's elbow. She had arrived during the envelope presentation, slipping in through the back entrance with the quiet efficiency of a retired nurse who had been underestimated her entire life, and found it extremely useful. Nice work, kiddo, she said. I learned from you, Claire said. Marge patted her hand. Then she looked across the room to where the federal compliance officer was speaking quietly with two board members, and said with enormous satisfaction, I knew that bracelet wasn't an accident. Engagement point 3. Real strength is not the absence of fear. It is deciding that the truth is worth the cost of telling it. If Claire's story has ever felt like yours, the slow erasure, the disbelief, the loneliness of being misread by someone who should know you, then you already know what it took for her to stand at that table, and you already know what you are capable of. The 72 hours after the birthday dinner moved in a controlled blur. The FBI opened a formal investigation into the foundation by the following morning. An emergency board meeting was convened. Victoria retained a criminal defense attorney, the kind who specialized in white-collar financial crimes, and charged accordingly before she had even left the building. Brooke Calloway cooperated with investigators within 48 hours in exchange for a plea agreement. Her consulting firm was dissolved. The shell company's accounts were frozen. The $2.3 million began its long administrative journey back toward the scholarship fund it had been stolen from. Dan Kowalski was appointed interim foundation director by a unanimous board vote. His first official act, reinstating Claire's Westfield Elementary after-school arts program, fully funded, 4 schools in the first year with expansion planned. He texted Claire afterward, Mrs. Patterson says to tell you she's going to name the art room after you. I told her it should probably be named after your mother, but I lost that argument. Victoria, upon her release from initial questioning, was given terms by Ethan that were brief and final. He delivered them in her hospital room. She had been admitted following the evening with elevated blood pressure, whether genuine or strategic, no one was entirely certain. With no lawyers present, just a son and his mother, alone, for the last honest conversation they would have for a very long time. You destroyed my marriage, Ethan said. His voice was quiet and completely without anger. The anger had burned down to something cooler and more permanent. Clarity. You manufactured evidence. You stole from the foundation. You turned me into someone who didn't believe the woman I love. He stood. The Connecticut estate. Full staff. Comfortable. Every comfort you need. But no foundation access. No penthouse access. And supervised video calls with my child. When that child arrives. Contingent on behavior. He moved toward the door. Those are the terms. Take them or lose me entirely. Victoria looked at her son. For the first time in his memory, she looked uncertain. The calculation that had lived permanently behind her eyes was absent, replaced by something she had successfully avoided her entire adult life. "Richard," she started. "Ethan," he corrected quietly. "My name is Ethan. It's always been Ethan." He paused at the door. "I'm choosing my wife, Mother. I should have done it 14 months ago. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure she knows I understand that." He left. The months that followed were not a fairy tale resolution. Claire had been honest about that from the beginning. In the couples therapist's office, on the 4th floor of a building on the Upper West Side, sitting 3 feet from Ethan on a gray sofa, while a patient woman named Dr. Caroline Marsh created the space for things to be said that had needed saying for a long time. "You believed I was having an affair," Claire said in the 3rd session, her hand resting on the visible curve of her pregnancy. "You believed it because your mother told you to, yes, but also because some part of you thought a woman like me, from where I'm from, might eventually prove to be exactly what she said I was." She looked at him steadily. "That's not something that heals with apologies. That heals with time and with change that I can see." Ethan did not defend himself. That was, Claire thought, the first real sign. "You're right," he said. "And I know I'm going to spend a long time earning the right to be believed when I tell you it will never happen again." "Yes," Claire said. "You are." Dr. Marsh, who had been taking notes, said nothing and wrote something down. He proved it in the ways that mattered. He stopped deferring to his mother's judgments as a reflex. He asked Claire's opinion on foundation decisions and then argued for her position in board meetings. He attended every prenatal appointment, not as performance, but because he genuinely could not bring himself to miss a single one. He sat with her through the weeks when nausea hit hardest and brought her crackers at 3 in the morning and never once made her feel like she was inconvenient. When Claire formally requested a seat on the Mason Holdings board, an active role in strategic planning, not a ceremonial title, he did not simply agree. He went to the board and made the case himself. She sat in on her first full board meeting at 7 months pregnant and asked 3 questions that resulted in a revision to their East Coast real estate portfolio that saved $11 million over the following year. Richard Chen, the board member who had sat silent while Victoria redirected her proposal 14 months earlier, found her after the meeting. "Mrs. Mason," he said, "I owe you an apology, a significant one." "You owe the foundation one," Claire said pleasantly. "I'll consider mine included." He nodded. He deserved that. Elena Rose Mason arrived on a Thursday morning in early April, weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with her father's dark hair and her mother's exact expression of someone who has arrived somewhere and is already taking notes. Ethan held her in the delivery room and could not speak for approximately 4 minutes. Marge, who had driven up from Columbus the week before and shown no signs of leaving, stood in the corner and cried with the unself-conscious abundance of a woman who had been waiting her whole life to meet this particular person. "Hi," Ethan finally managed. To the small, furious, beautiful face, "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that you're wanted here." Claire watched him. She thought about the notes in the silk box. 27 of them, intact in her dresser drawer in their new home. They had bought the brownstone together 8 months ago. Their choice. Their name on the deed. Both of them, no corporate structure, no dynasty management. A garden in the back, a guest room for Marge, a kitchen with enough counter space for someone to make coffee at 7 in the morning while someone else stood at the window and watched the street come to life. On a Sunday afternoon in June, 6 weeks after Elena came home, they had a small ceremony in that garden. Not a wedding. They were already married. A renewal. An acknowledgement. Ethan's close friends, Marge, Dan Kowalski, who gave a toast that was exactly 3 sentences long and made everyone laugh and then made Claire cry, Susan Ford, Tom, and Linda Briggs. Linda in remission, her treatment complete, her face carrying the specific radiance of someone who has been very afraid and come out the other side. Ethan stood in the June light and spoke without notes. I promise to believe you first, he said, to protect what we have from anything that would poison it, including my own failures, to never confuse the empire with what actually matters, and to make the coffee every morning for the rest of my life, exactly how you like it, because some rituals are worth protecting. Claire held Elena in one arm and took his hand with the other. I promise to speak my truth even when it costs me something, she said, to ask for respect alongside love, because I have learned those are not the same thing, and to remember that real partnership means equal voices, equal power, equal trust. She paused. And to throw away the sweatshirt with the frayed cuff eventually. You wouldn't dare, he said. I absolutely would. Elena made a sound of what appeared to be editorial commentary. Everyone laughed. Later, when the garden had emptied and Marge had finally gone inside with the baby, and the evening was coming down gold and soft over the city, Ethan and Claire stood together in the yard. I keep thinking about that first morning, he said, in the penthouse, before any of it. You were standing at the window, and I brought you coffee, and you looked at me like you couldn't quite believe I was real. You weren't making sense yet, Claire said. You were too good. And then I became very bad. And then you did. And then... He turned to face her. Can you actually? We built it twice, she said quietly. The first time on something romantic and beautiful and not quite real. The second time on something that survived the worst of both of us. She looked at him. The second version is better. It's harder and messier, and it cost us both things we can't get back. But it's real. It's real, he agreed. The city sounds came over the garden wall. Traffic, someone's music, the small, continuous life of a place that did not pause for anyone's private story. Claire had grown up within the sound of those same rhythms, in a smaller house, with a mother who had stretched every dollar and never let a single school play go unwitnessed. She thought about Mrs. Patterson, about 212 kids with watercolors. She thought about the note she still kept. Watching you sleep is my favorite form of meditation, and about the woman she had been when she received it, the woman she had been required to become in order to survive what came after, the woman she was now. Not one of those women, all of them, the whole, complicated, continuous, hard-won thing. The final wisdom, offered not as advice, but as truth earned. Real love is not found in the perfect moments. It is rebuilt, slowly, honestly, sometimes painfully, in the moments after everything has fallen apart. The question is not whether your life will be tested. The question is who you discover yourself to be when it is. Claire Hartwell Mason was a woman who kept notes, told the truth, protected the vulnerable, and refused, even at the absolute bottom of things, to become what she was told she was. That is not a fairy tale. That is a choice, made daily, made especially on the hard days, the same choice her mother had made, and her mother before her. And now in a brownstone garden, in the fading June light, the same choice her daughter would one day watch her make, and carry forward into her own life, in her own way, against whatever tried to erase her. Closing disclaimer. The content in this video, including the story, characters, narrative arc, and all supporting material, was manually researched, developed, and edited by our team with care and intention. Every element was crafted by hand to bring you a story that is meaningful, emotionally honest, and worthy of your time. We do not use automated content generation for our storytelling. What you just heard was built for you by people who believe that real stories, even fictional ones, have the power to change how we see ourselves. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying.